I was born in Madison, South Dakota in 1952. My dad farmed on the east end of Lake Madison and in Lake County, and my mom was a homemaker. I've got two older sisters, and so I was the baby growing up, and I came 5 years after, so I had the benefit of having older sisters as role models. So I was kind of the tomboy and liked the outdoors, and I loved school, so I had a pretty nice childhood. You know, we actually lived in Madison, and Dad drove out to the farm every day, so until I was in the 8th grade I didn't actually live on the farm. Then in 8th grade we moved out to the farm, and I had some responsibilities, but pretty much school was my job. So, well, on my dad's side, both of his parents had died, and so I never knew those grandparents, but they were Irish, and my dad's dad was a banker, and his mom died just a tragic death when my dad was about 4 of tuberculosis. She'd gone off to an institution in St. Louis, and so, which is what they did, is they just kind of put you away and kept you in a sanitarium. And so I've had a chance to read some of the letters she wrote home while she was in that situation, and she had left my dad and his younger sister at home. They were 4 and 2. It just breaks your heart to read it. And so she was probably in her early 30s when she died, and so obviously I didn't get to meet them, but my mom's mom and dad, my grandma was Norwegian and my grandpa was Swedish, and so they were not litigious, but they could have a good fight, and they liked to fight. So the Swedes and the Norwegians did not always get along, but so I've got some of both of those things in me, I guess. I was married to a fine guy, Brent Wilber, I married him right after law school, and we have 2 children, 2 daughters, and they both live in Sioux Falls, and one of them is married with a 16-month-old child, so I'm a grandma. And I thought that being a mom was my best ever favorite job, but grandma may be nudging up against it, but being a mom and a wife were and still are the best things about my past and my life. So I still, I've got daughters who I don't have any idea how come they've turned out the way that they've turned out, because I couldn't love them more. They are really bright young women with great futures ahead of them, and they're people who I would love to know even if they weren't my daughters. So I'm lucky. Well, they worked hard, and times weren't always easy for them. They were Depression babies, and so they had that mentality. And even today, my mom at 91 can tell you on any given day where you can find the lowest priced eggs and milk in Sioux Falls. She is a student of the weekly ads and very frugal. And so frugality, hard work, and honesty were primary concerns in our family. To this day, when mom goes out to her, my dad died in 99, but and mom lives over in Sioux Falls too, so I'm lucky to get to spend time with her, and she's very fit and healthy, and it's just a great benefit to me to be that close to her now at this time of her life. But if we go to a restaurant, I can tell it just about kills her when she looks at the price of a tuna salad sandwich, because that's not at all, I mean, she could do it for much cheaper at home. So I went to grade school and high school in Madison. In my day, there was no kindergarten, so none of this pre-kindergarten education even mattered in me, but they put me on a school bus at age 6, and I went off to first grade and loved every minute of school. I went through high school there. One of my favorite teachers is a gentleman by the name of Norman Johnson, and he was the grammar teacher when I got into high school, first year of high school, 9th grade, and then he also taught novel class. So his love of reading and in those days you didn't watch the video before you read the book, you just read the book. And so he imparted his love of that reading and novels and what they have to offer to his students, and he was just a great guy. Now, he was also the tennis coach, and it never occurred to me to say, okay, why is there only boys? Why do only boys get to play tennis? The girls I didn't have sports when I was in high school. So it never occurred to me to ask then. Only later did I think, oh, we really got cheated. Well, in my family there sure was. I was not the first one to go to college. My sisters both went to college. My mom and dad were high school graduates. Dad did a couple years of college, went to the service, and came home and went right into, I think he sold cars for a while and then ended up in farming. So they wanted their kids to go. So both my sisters went to college. Girls could not wear jeans. You had to wear a skirt. You couldn't wear culottes. Your skirt had to touch the floor when you knelt. All the activities I wanted to be in, I could be in. It's just that they hadn't yet gotten to the point where they'd have girls' sports, or they would, but debate and declam and band and chorus and all those kinds of things. You could do plays. Those things were all pretty normal. And then going to college, I started out college when there were still curfews. The women had to be in at 10 p.m. on a weekday and midnight on the weekends, and so we had some of those archaic things. And well, I worked in the summers at the local pool and didn't work during the school year because we lived out in the country, and we were 7 or 8 miles. That's what they call country there. In Pierre, you'd say you could live 50 miles outside of Pierre, but we lived out in the country, so I didn't work during the school year. And I was in the activities that I could be. I was in forensics and the music portion of singing and making. I was in band, and for athletics you could be in intramural sports, volleyball, those types of things. And then I was active in swim team through high school because that was one sport where you could participate on a level playing field with the guys, and that was a summer sport, and it wasn't a school sanctioned sport. So when I was a freshman in high school, my sisters were freshmen in college and senior in college, and so I knew I would go to college. And my dad had, as a farmer, his dad was a banker. He planted a seed with me a long time, probably even before high school, about, why don't you think about law school someday, So he planted that seed, but I wasn't focusing on any of that. I just knew I wanted to go to college and do something. And so when I got to college and I started in as I think I went through 6 majors. I mean, I was going to be a library science major. I was going to be, at that time they had secretarial. I took some secretarial courses, and I said, oh, this isn't for me. I can't do shorthand. And, so I did quite a few things, and then ended up in the government program at USD. And Doc Farber was the head of that, which of course, I was not a Farber boy, but I loved the political and the government type courses, so that's where I was drawn to. Professor Darlene down there and Alan Clem, there were great professors in that government department. Well, I graduated from Madison, lived in Madison, and I really wanted to go to Gustavus Adolphus, a Lutheran school in Minnesota. And my dad said, he'd been on the State Board of Education, he'd done some work, he'd been a legislator, and he was very convinced that South Dakota schools were a good value. So he said, you could do that, but I'll pay if you go anywhere in South Dakota. So, and he suggested Brookings, and I said, well, that's a little too close to Madison. And had I looked at the towns, Brookings is a beautiful town, and Vermilion, if I was looking at it with an adult eyes, I might have said, isn't nearly as beautiful as Brookings, but Vermilion was the magnet, and it was the perfect fit for me.
Right.
I loved the town. When I went to USD for college, so I would have started college in the fall of 70, and I joined a sorority, and so I had a kind of a built-in niche that way of friends and support, and I still had a niche of Madison friends who were down there, and so I just felt like the world was opening up. Ended up being involved in the Student Senate, and that was a good opportunity to kind of legislate and learn a little bit about that. And, then I think I was in some of the fun stuff like strollers and those kinds of activities. So when I graduated undergrad with my government degree, I had not yet decided to go to law school. And so I kind of decided at the last minute, got my application in, had taken the LSAT, so I was ready to go. And so I decided in that spring of my senior year to go to law school. And so they reminded me of a couple months into the first year of me showing up on their doorstep saying, this is the worst thing I could have ever done. First year was hard. It was terrible. It was ghastly. John Hageman was the legal writing instructor, and his avowed task was to make life as difficult as he could for freshman students in his writing class, and he did a wonderful job of it. He was extremely competent. And then in the second year of law school, I learned who John Hageman really was, and I came to love him. He's just a tremendous fellow and a great part of what made law school fun for me, and turned things around after that first year. So of the 60-some, we were about a third. We're 20 out of 60, roughly, women. So in the class ahead of me that my husband, who wasn't my husband then, was in, had fewer, and the class ahead of that had even fewer. So the numbers were going up.